Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah!
Hi, I'm Donna Loren.
And I'm Dr. Adam Gerace.
And you are listening to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast. Chapter 17, 90-Day Guarantee, Part 2. Beverly reiterated within the first few months of my therapy, I never tried to drag these relationships out so I can just make money. You're doing well. You're on your own. What? No way. Felt that as long as she was willing, I told her, I had a lot more to deal with. In fact, I had been with Beverly for a year when the earthquake occurred in Northridge. The morning of the Northridge Earthquake, January 17th, 1994, the earth literally opened for me in another way that day. It was early in the morning when the earthquake hit, around 4:30. I was living in Brentwood with my daughter Katie and my 3 little doggies and crazy cockatoo, wandering around in the dark of our condo, barefoot because I couldn't find my shoes and trying to avoid the shattered glass. I walked right into an open door and boom, literally saw stars. A big bump formed on my forehead. I found my way to Katie's room to check on her, and apparently she had slept through it. The next thing my mind turned to was calling my mother. By then, it was about 5 in the morning. I dialed my mother and heard her voice on the other end, and she said, "Lisa?" I told her, "No, it's your daughter." The earth opened up simultaneously with my mother's relationship. As soon as I retired, Morey and Ruth sort of adopted this other girl to assume the same role, and they did that many times with different people to kind of fill the void. Apparently, somebody named Lisa was now that person. I wasn't really offended, but I was shocked that she wouldn't know my voice and that her priorities were so distorted. After I had checked on my own daughter, I had thought of her welfare. I collected myself and told her I was calling to check to see if everything was okay. I immediately associated the earthquake with an unearthing of truth. Much of this was because I was becoming more in touch with my ability to discern. It was the start of my realizing that I must stop trying to accommodate and do whatever I could do to win her love or acceptance. After the earthquake, there were a series of aftershocks. During one of these, I became aware that I stiffened up and my whole body clenched. Beverly explained to me that I was a clencher. What does that mean? Well, no wonder I always felt like my guts were twisted. Normally, you think that clenching would be a fist when you're ready to strike, but it goes deeper than that. Clenching can also mean your jaw, creating so much tension that you grind your teeth unconsciously, causing TMJ. She also told me that there were more than 600 nerves in the spinal cord, and clenching causes the nerves to become rigid and therefore easily shattered. She would tell me to relax and envision these 600 plus nerves as warm taffy, thereby allowing the nerves to flow through the experience. That really made sense to me. It is mind-blowing that when the old tapes are erased in your brain and the new thoughts that replace them become part of your new lexicon, how quickly this transformation can happen. I love being receptive to healthy ideas. I welcome them every day. I loved that I could find the power within myself to heal. Conversely, I witnessed my mother putting doctors on a pedestal, looking to them to fix her ailments with drugs or surgery, which they never could. At that point in my life, I think to a great extent I was being prepared for the truth, and so I had to begin this major purge. I like to call this the Lasagna Effect. Think of every momentous occasion in your life as another layer. There's a nice, big, thick pasta at your foundation. And then comes the goo, or the glue. Then the sauce, and so on, and so on. Every layer is filled with multiple ingredients, which explains the complexity of what it takes to get to the essence of what is causing your pain. If there's too much spice in the sauce, the pain could be very intense. My own lasagna is in a very deep dish, and I'm still uncovering the layers. A tremendous amount of my focus on healing was my relationship with my mother, but Morey was a mystery to me as well. I just had to find out what made my dad tick. I was feeling a bit mischievous when the idea came to me to play a trick on my parents. Oh, that was a bad one on my part, in one way, but oh, so satisfying for my own benefit. It was payback time for the Rome indulgence Morey put me through to teach me a lesson about alcohol. My daughter Katie's girlfriend had a very liberal mother who was actually my daughter's teacher and private tutor. Both girls were in their mid-teens and had already experimented with tobacco and marijuana. In these times, I remained sober and had not been around that stuff for many years. The idea struck me that I would invite Katie's friend and her mother to a Mother's Day picnic. I asked them to bring dessert, but not just any dessert. I then invited my mother and Morey to meet at Temescal Canyon Park, just up from PCH, for Mother's Day. One by one, we all gathered and laid out our spread. Linda brought brownies spiked with hashish. I knew of the recipe beforehand, and in fact, I was intrigued to experiment with my parents. I just didn't tell them what the secret ingredient was. My mother, being a chocoholic, ate 4. Oh, gosh, she was literally a beached whale, completely wasted and looking very content. Morey ate half of one brownie, and I tasted a corner. I really didn't want to alter my perception of what was about to happen. My daughter was cautious as well, wanting to be aware of her surroundings. Suddenly, to my surprise, my dad stood up and walked over to a spot on the grass. He turned to all of us and transformed himself into a little boy. It was as though it was his turn to talk in front of the class. And before he spoke, he looked at his audience for guidance, peering into my eyes from where he stood. I decided to ask him a question. Before I tell you what that question was, I want you to know that all I really knew about my dad was that he was an animator and had a brother Louie, a sister Dorothy, his mom Rose, and dad Ben. He had a white bulldog named Billy when he was growing up. I had heard that he served 8 years in the military and had jumped ship in Hawaii, where he stayed for 8 months photographing beautiful women, scenery, and war scenes. Fell into a garbage can, broke his elbow, and was discharged with the rank of sergeant. He owned guns, had a darkroom in the garage, and loved my mother. Also, he had a special affinity for recognizing talent. So my question to this grown man standing before us, waiting to deliberate as a young boy, was, what was it like in the orphanage? One subject he rarely touched on was his days in an orphanage. Sometimes he would drive on Motor Avenue on the west side and pass by the Racquet Club. He would always point to a cluster of Spanish-style mission-like buildings across the street and tell me that was the Vista Del Mar orphanage where he stayed for a while. Well, I never delved into the subject. We just didn't have that kind of a relationship where he was forthcoming. Now, obviously, he withheld the identity of being my adopted father. Morey literally took a little boy's stance and focused his eyes out into space. Even his voice emulated a vivid recall and registered a bit lighter. Before God and all, he took the stage and began his recitation. He began. When I was 4 years old, my mother was sick with tuberculosis. She had to go to a hospital. My dad had to work. He was a tailor to Clark Gable and Erich von Stroheim. He made their suits and tuxedos by hand. He worked in Beverly Hills. We lived in Boyle Heights. My sister Dorothy was still a baby and put into foster care. My brother Louis, 3 years older, and I were taken to Vista Del Mar to live full-time. Sometimes I would see my dad's big Buick coming up the driveway to visit Louis and me. He didn't come that often. It took 4.5 years for my mom to be strong enough to leave a convalescent home and be at our house. 6 months later, after a total of 5 years, Louis, Dorothy, and I were reunited with our mother. Morey continued. My mom and dad met in Russia. Rose was one of 5 children born to an aristocratic family of wealth. Her father was a master tailor in Minsk with 15 apprentices, one being Ben, my dad. Ben and Rose met when she was 11. Her days were filled with private school half-day, then private tutoring in Judaism. Her family lived very elegantly with full-time help to care for the home and children. Ben fell in love with Rose and pierced her ears with a needle and string that was tied in a loop to sanctify their bond. By age 15, Rose and Ben were married and sent away to America. The war was escalating in Russia. World War I worried her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Munyan. They wanted a new life for their daughter and felt confident Ben would take good care of her. A trunk filled with her dowry was packed with all the necessities and luxuries for them to begin a new life in America. Fur-lined coats and jackets made by her father, silver and linens prepared by her mother, hats and shoes and matching handbags, all the comforts Rose was accustomed to. Not speaking a word of English, the two boarded a ship and waved goodbye to Rose's family. She would never see them again. When Ben and Rose arrived to Ellis Island, they were so excited. They forgot to take the trunk. The only thing that survived was a silver candelabra used for saying prayers on Friday night. She kept it out of the trunk on their long journey to America. Rose was weakened by this experience. They settled in Connecticut, where Ben could take a job as a tailor, and Rose became pregnant. And my brother Louis was born when she was 16. By 21, she had had my baby sister Dorothy and me, and she became very ill. When Louis and I were sent away, I discovered my big brother had a special talent for drawing. We both saw an ad in a newspaper. The Los Angeles Times was offering prize money to anyone who could draw the Empire State Building the best. I told Louis, "You're good enough to enter." I was maybe 5 years old and already able to recognize talent. My brother Louis won. Bingo! I was hitting the jackpot. Just half a hash brownie, and the guy who raised me was finally revealing himself to me. At least he was helping me to understand why he was so fixed on my talent while I was growing up. His energy withered as he receded to sit back down and reflect in silence. We all lingered in the afternoon sun with cool breezes blowing off the ocean. My daughter left with her teacher and her girlfriend, and my mother awoke from her stupor and picked herself up to leave with my dad. At least, at this time, I still believed he was my real dad, and so thankful for his insight. I know it's unfair to withhold information like there's hash in the brownies, but I was on a truth mission, and I achieved my goal. A little time went by, and things were different in my relationship with my parents. The condo building that my daughter and I were living in had security doors that opened to an atrium, and then to each private dwelling. One night at midnight, I heard a buzz. I went to the intercom on the wall to see who it was. It was my mother. She said with alarm, "Are you okay? We've been searching for you. Let us in." At midnight? I opened the door, and there's Ruth and Morey all upset. "Oh, thank God. We've been driving around for 3 hours," my mother told me. "Alan's been driving us from jail to jail. We got this call. Somebody said that you were picked up for prostitution, and we've been going from jail to find you." Oh, how absurd, I was thinking to myself. Wait a minute. If this was true, and you actually believe this was true, wouldn't you have been told where I was? None of this made sense. But I just stood there and listened to what I thought was insanity, supposedly driving around for hours looking for me, before finally at midnight they're at my place. I let them say their piece, and with great composure, I dismissed them and said goodnight. Since the earthquake, there was definitely another dimension of distance in my relationship with my parents. It left me wondering, what is wrong with this relationship? I couldn't put my finger on it, but my normal habit with my mother was to call her in the morning. True to form, the morning after my parents' drama, I felt the urge to habitually go to the phone and call her. I began literally grabbing for the phone physically and slapping my own hand and saying, "No." Each morning subsequently, I repeated this discipline until I broke the habit. Sadly, my mother stopped calling. A dramatic incident occurred. An unknown fan painted a portrait of me when I was a teenager that hung over the fireplace on the Grandview Boulevard living room wall. It was a pensive pose and one that my family and friends always admired. In a middle-class home of 1,100 square feet, one doesn't often find an oil painting of this size of a family member unless there was perhaps an artist among themselves. The portrait hung there for so long that the old paint on the walls wore a shadow around the frame, at least 30 years. CJ's fondness for my parents had grown to a fever pitch. I sensed his need for them because, independent of me, he would spend time with them. After the incident I experienced with my mother the morning of the Northridge earthquake, more bitter feelings reared their ugly head. It's not clear to me exactly what details caused my parents to take this action, but one day, our unsung champion returned home to me, carting my portrait in his muscular arms. He delivered a message to me with it. "Your mother and father disowned you." My heart sank. The trap was set, and I was the bait. My revolution from within was completely activated now. Every revolution, whether external, as in empires, or personal, comes in stages. I was poised for a major change. I knew the first move I had to make was clarifying the role I had with the man in my life. An incident arose that brought that to light, and after being enmeshed with CJ for many years, it was over. There would be no maybes in this decision. It would be a clear and definite, it's over. 6 months before my split, an extreme parallel occurred only 6 buildings away from where I was living. It was the tragedy of Nicole Simpson's murder. A few days before the crime was a rainy night. I had 2 little dogs that needed to go out and do their business, so through a security door without a leash, I was about to let them run out quickly to the front lawn. I saw 2 big dogs that probably weighed 200 pounds each walking by the entrance. I kind of panicked because my dogs were so little that I thought they'd be lunch. But the man who was holding those big dogs and wearing a hooded coat turned his face toward me and said, "It's okay." That man was O.J. Simpson. When it came time to end my relationship, I learned a valuable lesson from that terrible tragedy. Since the disownment from my parents had come by messenger through my boyfriend, I could not allow myself to be betrayed anymore. Even though he attempted to talk to me and see me for at least a year, I stood my ground and never exchanged a syllable. Ironically, he always encouraged me to be closer with my mother during the course of our relationship. That would be a positive thing in most relationships. Weirdly enough, he ended up living in my parents' trailer in their backyard after we parted. This is what I wrote. Betrayal. Watching the dancing flame inside a Swedish bowl made of glass with images clear, a man and woman dancing. I think of my dream to have a man whom I love sweep me off my feet to the dance floor, and as we move together, we glide gracefully to rhythm and the beat. My mind takes me to a place of a man whom my mother saved. He was my sexual addiction, a state of ungrace, disgrace, and when the end came, a new dance began. My mother took him in to be with her. A trailer parked beside her house, only 14 feet long, was his home. I'm sure she greeted him at her back door with a lusty smile from the dance floor. I saw them dancing one night when he and I were together there. The music played, and awkwardly he began to sway and lead, and I saw his eye wander, as I often would, to my mother dancing with my dad. He left me to cut in, then they let go of any inhibition. They were in sync. They were in heaven. I closed the door. For a woman who lives a life of unrequited love, it is only fair that her daughter, the product of her despair, gift her with a dancing flame. When her hair is colored to veil her suffering, a wink and a nod from her man Friday filled her life at a time when mine was in a void. Her dancing flame, my betrayal. Her glory, my shame. Her fun, her game. My wisdom, I gain. 6 very frightening weeks went by, and I was in a void. It's a very strange place to be with no sense of time or space. I guess it's not uncommon when one is experiencing loss. This was also the first time I had ever been single in my entire adult life. Those 6 weeks felt like an eternity. Out of the blue, my friend Patty in Sedona invited me to sing my song for Sedona at a special assembly she was calling at her elementary school. Her invitation included the mayor, that should be present, and about 500 members of the community, as well as the students and faculty of the school where she taught kindergarten. Patty is in my angel network and really spared me a lot of anxiety when I began making plans to accept her invitation. You know how breaking up devastates you. even if it's a change for the better. So I called my friend Jerry, who lived in Sedona.
Really interesting to hear about how this earthquake, this very well-known earthquake that the people that experienced it at the time remember well. You read a lot about the Northridge Earthquake of 1994, but that it paralleled a change or an opening up in your relationship with your parents and the relationship you were having with this person, CJ, but that it precipitated, or at least was alongside, some decision making and the courage to move out of relationships or put some distance in relationships that weren't serving you at that time.
Oh, yes. Oh, Adam, I'm sure this is a universal kind of experience that too many of us have had and are having. Being able to discern, when there's a certain dynamic that's really destructive, and it's very confused because you're in relationship with people you love, you have feelings for, and yet there's it's just a bad fit, you can spend your whole life wanting to fit in and try to make things work and tolerate it, and then you go and complain, and then you recover, and then you come back to it again, and you might do that over and over and over again, and that's just the way it is. But it was so intense for me. This period of I don't even know what to call it, but it's almost like a fantasy.
I mean, some of it is quite absurd. Even some of the stuff that they were thinking kind of goes
and
into that
accusing
ridiculousness.
It's, and I don't know if it's about the kind of instinct that someone has that is basically predatory in a relationship, and the victim is vulnerable because they're sensitive to feeling guilty, they're sensitive to feeling obligated. What else?
Well,
Sacrifice, I mean, they're willing to sacrifice themselves.
We've spoken a lot about this before, this idea of the roles in relationships or the schemas we've developed. And I think that image of the lasagna is a really good one because, the foundations that we often build our lives on are formed early on and formed in relationship with our parents. And so we often assume these roles that continue to play out until we recognize them. And it's this kind of odd juxtaposition that on the one hand, you're gaining more clarity from seeking therapy with Beverly Dennis. And on the other hand, there's these very odd and very confusing situations coming up. And I almost wonder if it's no coincidence that as you learn to discern more and understand more about yourself, maybe that subtly shifts the relationships, and then the people in those relationships respond in more and more extreme ways.
Well, I think you're correlating how delicious lasagna can be.
Well, it can be very delicious. And as an Italian, I wholeheartedly endorse that.
Yes, but I think what you're saying is when the clarity comes and the truth surfaces, that the dynamics in the relationship, of a predatory kind of situation and a victimization, that the awareness, brings more light into the subject, and so the predator has to be much more coy, much more venomous, much more obvious, maybe. What do you think?
I think it's, and it's almost perhaps that comes from even the threat that they're feeling in some way because things are changing, that it's whether it's deliberate or whether it's just a reaction to all of a sudden the relationship not being in the way that they've expected. I was speaking to a friend about this recently, this idea that I think there's much more awareness in the world now. We were talking about traditionally when we think of relationships that are not good relationships, we think of some of the more typical signs of that, whether it's a physical abuse or something like that. But more and more, I think we're recognizing that those subtle acts of manipulation, second guessing, gaslighting, all those sorts of things are more subtle forms of a manipulation at an emotional level. And as we're becoming more aware of that, perhaps that's changing that for a lot of people, that
Oh,
that
God,
doesn't have to
so.
exist.
I really, I mean, I keep praying for more truth, more honesty, more integrity, more courage. You know, it seems like the extremes, I think that's what you're talking about, are just bringing things more to light. And, it's like the good old saying of it takes, it's darkest before the dawn. And it takes the dark, to reflect the light. So, that's what I'm praying for, is that, that more and more integrity and more light come into the purview of our planet, and certainly in my own little sphere, and I hope in your, because we each have our own little worlds, that we can shine our light even brighter and brighter, and then take action, which initially is so painful, and then, but the truth is so incredibly rewarding, even though it leaves deep wounds. The wounds can begin to heal, and and then the life that you lived before, you don't necessarily leave behind. I think it kind of develops a compassion within you to see the limitations that you've lived with. It's like being on a super strict diet, and just feeling deprived of all the beauty of of all the sweetness of life.
Yeah. It's delicious, but there's I'm thinking of lasagna, I'm thinking of sweets, but I think that's really interesting, that idea of the compassion that you can feel for yourself or for other people. That when the earlier part of this reading really went into, I think, some of the lives of the people around you, and we often don't know our parents. Well, we can't know our parents in the life they had before us, and often much of that remains a mystery. But when we start to understand the situations that they had been in, the early life experiences, whether they were having to leave a country due to conflict or war or poverty or whatever the situation is in an individual families, and then to be uprooted and to have the trauma of doing that, or whether they had early life experiences such as Morey in an orphanage for a certain amount of years, and that separation from parents during that time, we understand more, and I think we develop more compassion. And it's not necessarily about, condoning what people go on to do and the effects that their approaches have on us. But when we start to understand this more, I think it kind of speaks again to what we've spoken about in the last couple of episodes of sometimes it's children raising children, and then there has to be a breaking of that pattern.
Yeah, well, it's even, some children are much wiser than the children that just don't come here to mature and develop. I don't know. Certainly, you would know more about that kind of development, but yeah, it's life experience, and it's like how much pain you can tolerate. and then what do you do about it? And
Mm.
yeah, it's I should say it's sad for me to have to, go back and review
Mm.
all these experiences, and yet price you pay for, just kind of being stuck in a situation that's really toxic. It was just way too toxic for me, and I'm very, very grateful that I'm at the place I'm at in my life now where I have more awareness, and I hope that our listeners, can kind of get over my reactivity in terms of not telling my parents, what was in the chocolate.
Mm. I think we're all, what we've always tried to do with this is I guess, come from a place of non-judgment and, trying to understand everyone or each other. And hopefully, I think they will take that on because, relationships are complex. And I think there's something to be said for even that exercise of being aware that when something is affecting you a certain way, that idea of sort of understanding your spine and the nervous system and things like that Beverly spoke about is sometimes even in the midst of very emotional situations trying to maintain something of ourselves. I think that we don't take on a lot of the negativity or whatever is coming from other people. We're able to put a bit of a shield around ourselves with that. I think that's actually quite a useful understanding. And as you're saying, a lot of this, what we're speaking about today, is perhaps on the darker side, but there is a light coming, as prefaced by those last couple of sentences of the reading. Given that this is actually our last episode for season 3, as we move into season 4, there's some exciting things that are going to happen.
Well, I tell you, it just takes a giant leap of faith, you know, to think that when you reach a certain precipice, that's not the end of the world. It, there could be a rainbow on the other side, and indeed there was.
And that'll be something that we explore as we go into season 4, which is really exciting. And this brings us up to further in the story, up to probably the present day is where season 4 will take us. So we look forward to that and continuing things such as welcoming people onto the show. We've already got some people scheduled in, and there will be more. And that leads us also into a talk about all the gamut of human emotions, because I think there's something that the fans are really going to enjoy now, because our next guest today it's a reunion of sorts. It's a beach party reunion.
Well, yes, this is a conversation with one of the beach bunnies. And, I would see her among the rest of the girls in the bikinis, which, I wasn't allowed to wear. But it's been, well, we all know, well over 50 years. But she accepted an invitation to come on and talk about her life. And her name is Salli. And so she's the girl in the orange bikini from my memory. And you will be hopefully hearing from her very soon. And here we go.
Well, Love's a Secret Weapon listeners, we have a beach party reunion. Today, we're thrilled to have with us beach party movie alumni Salli Sachse. Salli made her debut, like Donna, in American International Pictures Beach Party movie series with Muscle Beach Party, and went on to appear in Beach Party films, as well as in other AIP films, including their motorcycle series, their hippie psychedelic pictures like The Trip and Wild in the Streets, and even those films where the beach gang weren't on the beach, such as Ski Party and Sergeant Deadhead.
Yes.
Since then, she's gone on to become an artist, and we look forward to hearing about this and much more. Welcome, Salli. How are you today?
Thanks. I'm radiant. I just went for a walk around the village and down by the cove, and the water is blue, and waves are lots of white foam, and not too crowded, and it was just so pleasant.
Fantastic. And just to let our listeners know, you're living in La Jolla?
Yes,
Fantastic.
La Jolla.
I'm never quite
Newcomers call
sure.
it La Jolla because they don't know it's Spanish.
And we're so pleased. Donna and Salli, how long has it been? Donna, what's your estimate?
Oh my goodness. So this is half a century, Salli. It's a
I
50-year reunion, dear.
I think it's a little more than that. Let me see.
Oh, now who's counting?
Oh no, we're not
And
counting.
anyway, it's wonderful to be hanging 10 with you after all these years. That's
Oh,
lovely.
I know,
Yeah,
and we're both so different.
And La Jolla, for our listeners, for our Love's a Secret Weapon community, La Jolla is in this northern San Diego County, and it's one of my very favorite places on the planet. It is absolutely exquisite, and one of my favorite places in La Jolla is the park on a
Balboa Park.
bluff.
Balboa Park.
On the park above the bluff where the seals are, and
At La Jolla, yeah, at La Jolla,
in
yeah.
La Jolla, and the bluffs where the pelicans perch, and a variety of aviary, creatures, and very kind of ancient feeling coastline that has been undisturbed, which is so rare. And every time, I don't know, you can tell me if this is your experience, because you've been down there for quite a while. Every time
I grew up here.
Oh, well, then, I mean, it is an international hub.
Yes,
Every time I've ever walked along that corridor, you hear languages of every country.
Absolutely, and license plates from all over.
So tell me, so you were playing a bikini girl, a beach girl, when we met, and tell me about your experiences. As you know, I was kind of isolated from everyone, being, represented by Dr. Pepper, and Dr. Pepper being one of the financiers of the beach party movies. And so, I was one of the younger ones. So, I didn't really get a chance to commingle. So let me be a voyeur if you can share some of your experiences.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was plucked off the beach at Wind and Sea. There's a surfing shack there, and that's where the lifeguards sit. And my husband was a lifeguard at the time. And two of our friends, artist friends, developed a little caricature called a Hot Curl. And it was a pot-bellied surfer with a big nose and standing on the bluff and holding a can of beer in his hand. Well, they took this image and a cartoon strip to L.A., and they went to a studio, and they said, well, we can't do anything with it, but American International just did a beach party movie. So they took the image, the character, to AIP. And they said, we'd love to use Hot Curl in our movies. And they said, by the way, do you know any beach guys and gals? And he said, do I ever? So anyway, the two of the designer and the artist came down to the beach and said, hey, he wants to be in the movies. So he chose a group of us, and we, a couple days later, drove up in a couple woodies. And so we went to AIP's office where Sam Markoff and James Nicholson were. And so we changed into our swimsuits, bikinis, I might say, and stood around the desk. And Markoff was no dummy for a small talk. So he said, okay, let me see. You. Oh, and you. Don't call us. We'll call you. This is Jack Gilardi. He'll be your agent. And that was it. So we went home, and we got a call from Jack some of us got a call from Jack Gilardi on Friday afternoon saying, okay, report to the studio Monday morning, 6 a.m. And we thought, oh my God, we're quite a ways away. And he said, well, the girls can stay at the Hollywood Studio Club. So that's what we did.
For our listeners, just to define Sam Markoff and James Nicholson, they were the producers of these films,
and they were quite different personalities, from what I understand.
Yes, they were like hot and cold. Sam was kind of short and squatty, and Nicholson was tall and lanky. And
personality-wise as well, I think was Markoff more the louder sort of.
But they had been in that business for years, especially Markoff, before it was just a fluke that they did this one beach party movie, and it turned into a whole series.
Absolutely. And just to back up, Salli, you grew up in La Jolla, and had you, before you got that call and went in to meet with them, what were you doing? You'd graduated high school, and I think you'd won some beauty pageants and done some modeling.
Yes, I won Miss La Jolla, Miss Paris at the Fair, Miss California, Maid of California, and went to a national contest, and then it got a little boring after that. But anyway, I
wait a minute. You mean you had a collection of tiaras?
Yes. I did. I didn't know what to do with them. I mean, you just don't carry them around with you in your car or something.
You should have contacted Queen Elizabeth. She could have told you, you just get a cabinet and you line them all up.
Oh, right. Cute. Yeah, and I bet she is not a cabinet, but
and a security guard.
Yeah, walk-in safe. Yeah. So anyway, that's how it started for us. And so Linda and I booked a room.
Linda,
at the Hollywood.
Can you please?
Oh,
yes,
Linda Bent.
Linda Opie Bent.
She was a Miss La Jolla after me, and we were buddies. And our husbands were buddies. And that's a whole other story way down the line. So Bill Asher, the director of the first few of them, started calling us the Bookends because we both had long hair, and because it was windy, we wore it in a big bun on top of our heads with a headband around it. And so he called us the Bookends. And so when he'd start a shot, he'd say, okay, Bookends. And we, if there was a lineup of the girls or, a shot, each of us would have one end of the row. So that was fun.
I just remember how beautiful you were.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and I admired you. Did you favor an orange bikini? Is that fair in my memory?
No, we had lots of different colors, different bikinis, because a woman in La Jolla had a bikini shop. So we happened to know her. She made some bikinis for us. And then Maureen of Hollywood, who was a seamstress, she made some for me. So I had quite a collection.
And do you still have them?
No, but I do have a costume from the trip, this long leopard print thing, bikini, and a long with sides going down. And I have that, and then I have a cape from the movie The Trip also. And that's all I have left.
It's funny, because Donna, you're the same. You don't really have any of the beach party film costumes.
No, but I still love to wear a bikini. I mean, come on. We girls, we just want to have fun, right?
Yes. And you look fab.
Thank you. So, but are you still a beach lover and a sun worshiper?
I'm not a sun worshiper because my mother said, wear a hat. And my friend Linda did not wear a hat. I mean, she's so beautiful, but she still, I probably still worships the sun. So then I lived in Europe for 8 years, so I wasn't in the sun.
When was that?
That was in the 70s. 71 to 79.
What drew you to, and which country or city?
England and Holland.
Oh, and what drew you to Europe?
Well, I had done the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And so I was ready to move on. And a couple that I knew from Hollywood I saw them at a Christmas party, and they were on a trip to India, a saga. They had driven their Volkswagen bus across the U.S. and ended up in northern Europe, and then they wiggled their way down to Amsterdam, and they were in a cafe on New Year's Eve in Amsterdam, and they started talking to a woman, and she said, oh, she heard this story and said, well, come and stay at my place. So anyway, they rented when she had the baby, they had to wait a year, to be able to travel. So they rented a windmill out about a half-hour drive outside of Amsterdam. So
oh my God.
So I saw them at this party in the Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles, and they said, "Why don't you come and visit us?" And I thought, well, I don't think there's a reason I can't. So I figured out how to do that. And it was quite an adventure. I had been photographing Crosby, Stills, and Nash because my boyfriend and I were living in Peter Tork's mansion, and my boyfriend he was filming them, and I got my first camera. I was taking pictures, and there were all these musicians coming over. There was a music room, and Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills, and Nash would come over, and we'd have these tablecloths down in the middle of the living room, and that was our table, and we'd have a feast. And Owsley came once and brought a trunk full of steaks. He said, "You guys don't need to be vegetarians. You need some meat." So we did. We had some meat.
So wait a minute. Can I take you back on
Yeah.
the set of the Beach Party movies? Are you aware that the cinematographer, the cameraman, was Floyd Crosby?
Yes.
Is that how you met?
Yes, we met I knew Floyd before I knew David.
Okay, because I used to see David as a teenager come on the set.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah, right. And I want to talk a little bit about this because you're talking about that idea of the steak, Sally. I read somewhere, and Donna's certainly spoken about this and can speak to this in terms of working for Dr. Pepper. She had to maintain a weight. But I heard a rumor, Sally, that you lived on lettuce and lobster or something like that when you were filming the Beach Party films.
One of the publicists wrote that, and so everybody believed it.
But not true. We can set that straight.
Well, we didn't have lobster and lettuce every day, or 3 times a day, but we ate well. But we didn't eat pizza. Certain things we didn't eat to keep our life figures.
Yeah, your waistline.
Yeah. Yes.
And to go to the Beach Party films, let's reminisce a bit, or let's let both of you reminisce a bit. What was the vibe like? What was the set like? What was a typical day like for you?
In the first one that I was in, Muscle Beach Party, on the set, which was, we started filming, doing all the beach scenes. Well, there were the Malibu guys, surfers, and then there were the La Jolla guys, surfers, and they were the cream of the crop. I mean, these guys would surf 25-foot waves in Hawaii, and so they were always, joking on each other and being very mischievous.
And you're talking about Mickey Dora.
Mickey Dora, yes, and Butch Van Aertstalen. And so there were 4 hot ones from Malibu, or maybe more, and 4 from Windansea, and they were the top guys on the coast. So that was fun.
I bet.
So now, Dr. Adam, this is the proof in the pudding. To tell you how Salli's experience was completely different than my experience.
Oh, you had your dad watching over you, yeah.
And because in the Muscle Beach Party, I did a duet with Dick Dale.
Oh, on the set, yeah.
And so
I didn't remember you on the beach in Malibu.
That's right, because I was brought on in behalf of Dr. Pepper as their
Oh yeah.
and,
Oh yeah.
and
Well,
to
that was
do
lucky.
and to be a singer, and to do a duet with Dick Dale.
Yeah, that was big time.
Shop 101 is a new dance craze that they're gonna teach. The only place to learn is down at Muscle Beach. Flex up your biceps and that's how it goes. You turn your head and you strike up a pose. Do the mashed potatoes and you stick out your chest. The guys are looking good, but the girls are looking best. Everybody do it now. Move a little muscle now. Everybody kick the sand, come on now. Just like a muscle man.
Yeah, and you, Sally, you remember Donna's dad being on the set, I think.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
He wouldn't let her out of his sight.
And it was early calls for you in the morning on a cold beach, even though we're looking at a movie?
Gosh. On the beach, yes, we would have these terry cloth robes to wear, over our swimsuits, and we'd sit around a circle. Sometimes there'd be a fire, and just laugh and joke and have fun. It was really a lot of fun. There was a lot of pranks going on with the guys, and you just never knew what was going to happen.
Because Donna kind of spoke a little bit about this as well in one of our episodes, this idea that there were almost tears in the cast. So you kind of had the old comedians were kind of hanging out together.
Don Rickles. He had us in stitches. And he would make fun of Frankie and Annette in a very loving way. And we would just roar, and makeup always had to come and patch up our eyes because we would be laughing so hard we'd be crying. Do you remember that, Donna?
Well, that's why this is a very interesting conversation, because your experience was so different than mine.
I know, yeah. You were guarded and singled out.
I think that's
so
a very
good. I'm going to be a voyeur, just like Dr. Adam. We'll both be voyeurs for your experience.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember, but I know with the beach party films, there was also the film called Sergeant Deadhead. And
yes.
I think the the two of you and Deborah Wally did, I guess, for want of a better term, a shower scene together.
Yes.
No, everyone's going blank. No, that is. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say a song, and I was thinking, I don't think I sang. Yes, the shower scene where we're all in the shower, and then the brass comes along in a Jeep. We have to go out and salute, so we have to choose whether to salute with the hand that's holding the towel or the other one.
That is so slapstick. Oh my God.
You remember that?
Yeah, I think that was directed by Norman Torog, who was really kind of a classic, slapstick director in that era.
I'm interested in Sally and Donna, because I know Donna has a bit of a story which you might want to tell, just about Annette trying to tan and her skin just wouldn't do it. But how did you keep? Well, maybe Donna, you tell that story to Sally. She might know it, she might not.
Oh well, I happened to be in the makeup room with Annette, and she and I were on the Mickey Mouse Club together at one point, and so. We had that background, and so it was just the two of us and a makeup artist, and she came in blistered from sitting under a sun lamp trying to tan herself, and seriously, the makeup man had to gently, pat her skin without
rubbing,
disturbing her too much, but she
was very fair.
Extremely fair. I mean, she should have been a Northern Italian rather than, with a dark hair and very, very fair skin. But she came in, and she, by the time he was finished, it looked like you couldn't tell. I don't think anybody on the set.
Was that Ted Cooley?
Oh, that name does ring a bell.
Yeah, he wore glasses and.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. And there were a lot of them that had been in the worked in a lot of the 1950s movies.
It
And
would
you
have
can
been
see their name on the titles if you catch one of their old films.
absolutely. And Sally, did you ever have any problems with that, or were you just a natural tanner?
Well, I have a light olive skin, so my mother said wear a hat and sit in the shade. So I did that as much as I could, but I got tan so easily, I had to stay out of the sun. I got really dark, and then my face would be white because I'd wear a hat. So the 8 years that I lived in Europe did my skin a great favor.
Yeah, I bet. And when you think about those beach party films, is there a particular one that sticks out for you?
Well, naturally the first one, because that was the first impression of being in the movies, and the fascination with watching the camera people, and all the set happenings and goings on. So that was a favorite. And let me see. Well, gosh, I was in about 15 or 16. So it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, not all beach party, but AIP movies and a few other things. So it's hard. There were parts of each one that were special, like Sergeant Deadhead, that scene with Eve Arden singing, and we're all in uniforms in a dorm.
Captain with a 40-foot yacht asked me to forget him not. I thought I had him right on the hook, but then he took another look. You should have seen the one that got away. Tall and handsome with a touch of gray.
That was really fun seeing her. She was such a pro. They were all different. Some of them a location would be away from the beach, so those were different, like the race car ones. And then I did one in Arizona. They were all different. I can't say there's one. And then of course the Trip wasn't a beach party movie, but that was very memorable.
Yeah, let's talk about The Trip, because The Trip, you have quite a big role in that. That's a movie with Dennis Hopper and Bruce Dern and Susan Strasberg.
Yes.
And to remind
Peter Fonda.
Yes,
Yeah.
Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just to and I'm sure our listeners can track down The Trip, but you're sort of in the beginning, Sally, as someone that Peter Fonda meets, and then you come back when he starts having his trip. And tell us about that.
Well, I was brought on after the filming had started. So I remember going to this house in the Hollywood Hills, the house where the pool was, where Peter, the first part of his trip, and Bruce was there with his jacket on and, playing the straight role. And so I was sitting with the director and Bruce, and we were looking at the script. I hardly had any lines. I don't know why I was looking at a script, but I was mainly a visual.
Hello.
You're really something. This is Barbara.
Hi.
Hello.
Do you want to sit?
There's no place.
Oh, well, that's okay. I was just leaving. I'll see you at Oscar's.
It's nice to see you. Are you all right? Is everything okay?
I don't know. I was at Max's.
Why didn't you stay there?
Well, he sent me here.
Anyway, it was a unique experience. I had been widowed, and so I was living in a little cottage on Doheny Drive near Sunset. And when they were filming pickup shots for Peter Fonda, he came over and asked if he could put his makeup on in my house, since he didn't want to go, driving around with all this makeup on. So I had a little insight into the inner workings of the film. And Dennis was such a bad boy.
May I ask you, darling?
Yeah.
A sensitive question.
Sure.
When you said you're widowed, are you comfortable discussing that at all?
Yes, been, it's a legend here in La Jolla.
It seems to be that. Well, to begin with, tell us about Peter, your husband, Peter.
Well, I was in Hong Kong working in The Million Eyes of Sumeru, and got word on the set that my husband had been killed in an airplane crash, and I just couldn't believe it. I didn't believe it, and so what was his name? Deke Hayward, who was our chaperone there, had packed my my suitcase, and so when I went back to my room, everything was all packed. And then Frankie came in and said, "Oh, he was so sorry." And I said, "Well, I don't even know if it's true." I just was in such disbelief. But anyway, Pete and his friend PG, who was Linda's husband, were up in a plane, and PG was flying it, and he was trying to do a loop over the shack, and it's very difficult to do, and he was not successful, so they both went down there. So I'm out across the ocean and come back, and so there are two of these funerals in La Jolla, and it's just awful.
How long had you been married? Because you said
only 3 years. We'd known each other for 3 years, and then we were married for 3 years.
Right.
So, and he was a folk singer, and he was in one or two of the beach party movies, in the group scenes, dancing. And so we lived in a little cottage in west of Doheny, and he was working. He would play at the Troubadour with a friend of his, Larry Murray, on Monday nights, on hoot nights. And then he worked, he had a psychology degree, so he worked in Sylmar at a reform school.
Right.
So he was on vacation from there and was going fishing when I was going off to be in that movie.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. And so that must have been extremely traumatic for you.
Oh, it just knocked me knocked me out. Because he and I were the golden couple in La Jolla and the golden couple, in West Hollywood. So it was really a shock. And as a matter of fact, Peter Fonda drove down to La Jolla to visit me because he was concerned, and we sat in his car on Soledad Mountain, with a view of San Diego. And I thought it was very nice of him to do that, to come down and
for sure. And
I think I know where that is. I have some dear friends that live up there, and the views are absolutely exquisite.
360 of the ocean and all of San Diego and the beaches. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I'm interested in, obviously this is going back a long time, but how did you get through that situation? How did you get through being so young?
Well, I was the last one left under contract, so I was still working. And Dean Martin's daughter Claudia was in the films, and Nancy Sinatra. So I started dating Dean Martin's agent, and we were, just friends at first. So I hung out with them. We would go over for dinner every night at their house, and projectionists would come and show a movie, and then Dean would take 2 sleeping pills and go to bed because he had to get up and be on the set at 6:00. So they were very, very nice to me, and Jeannie and Dean had a beach house, a desert house out in Palm Springs, and so she would invite me to go out there with her. She'd drive us out. And one time she called me, I think it was on Thursday or Friday, and she said, "Sally, do you want to go to the Springs?" And that's what trendy is called, Palm Springs. And I said, "Sure." She said, "Well, Frank would like to fly us over in his jet." And you know who Frank was.
Of course.
So I went to Jeannie's house. We drove up to Frank's house up on the hill. And I was going to say Soledad, but no, it wasn't Soledad. And a driver drove us to the airport, and we flew over to Palm Springs. And then Frank had a big house in Palm Springs, and he was officially still married to
Barbara?
No, Farrow.
Oh, Mia Farrow, yeah.
Yeah, Mia. And they were getting a divorce, so he didn't want to stay at his house. So he stayed at Jeannie's house, and he would float and read, float on a air mattress on the pool. And then he, asked me if I wanted to go over to his house with him. So he called this driver, and so he gave me a tour of the house, and red velvet wallpaper in one of the rooms. It was pretty Las Vegas. And there were 4 guest houses out in the yard, so he could have his privacy when, he had people. And there was a walk-in refrigerator, and the shelves were lined with bottles of wine, champagne, anything you'd need for a party on the pronto. So it was quite an experience, and he was very nice and very casual. And I dated Mort for maybe a year or two, and my heart just wasn't in it. And well, I lived in that little cottage on Doheny because I had to move out of the place that we lived together. The memories would have been just too horrific.
Can I also ask you, so when did your love of becoming an artist start?
Well, I took art in high school, and we used to go off grounds and draw and paint around the high school, and we got to smoke because nobody was watching. Cigarette
behind the building, yep.
So I had that training. I mean, it wasn't a formal training. It was just, being a senior in art. And so I took some drawing classes. And when I lived in the little cottage on Doheny, I set up an easel in the kitchen, and I would sketch, still lifes, stuff like that. And then later, so my boyfriend and I went up to live with David. Crosby, Stills and Nash were just going out on the road. And so I went up to be house mother, and he took his photo equipment, and Bobby, my boyfriend. So we lived up there, and we'd cook, and I'd cook. And when they came in off the road and washed their clothes, they brought Mama Cass home one time from a
oh my
tour.
Goodness. Wow.
She went straight to the supermarket to get groceries because Bobby and I was doing some modeling through an agency in San Francisco, but I wasn't, really making much money, and I had some residuals, but we were just sort of squeaking by. And so anyway, Mama Cass went, and she brought home some peanut butter it was when the peanut butter came out, and it had a swirl of jelly in it. She thought that was just so trippy. And so it was really interesting. And then
you painted that?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
no, but I was painting there. I was painting from photographs I had taken of Crosby, Stills and Nash on stage. And so
is that your technique? Is that you use photography and then you painted from it?
Yeah.
Oh, because I really haven't explored your artwork, but we'd love to show our Love's a Secret Weapon community some of the work that you've done over the years. And you have it displayed in a gallery in La Jolla? Well,
everything I have is in storage right now, but I have a website, sallisachse.com. And on the website, I've got clips of the movies I was in, and still photographs of the movies. And then I have paintings, still lifes, oceans. So my life is on there.
Yeah.
SalliSachse.com.
Yeah, no, please, everyone check that out. There's some beautiful paintings on there, and Sally's story as well. And I want to ask, is it true that Jackson Browne wrote a song about you or inspired by you?
Yes. Well, I got, as I said, my friends invited me to Holland to stay in a windmill with them. And there was a going away party for me on a commercial set. One of our friends was working in a commercial, and they had a party for me on the last night of the last day of the filming. And Stephen Still's manager said, well, if you're going to be in London, you could stay at Stephen's flat. And I said, oh, okay. And so he gave me the telephone number of the flat. And I was on a plane the next day with two people that were at the party, and they had just bought a farm in Wales, a 200-acre farm. So they invited me to come up there and just acclimate to the time change and everything. So I stayed with them for a week or two. And then I took the train into London, and I called the flat. And who should answer but Jackson Browne. And I knew Jackson because he and Ned Doheny used to go to David Crosby's house and play. And Bobby and I rented a cottage next door to David's, which belonged to him. So we would be over at his house all the time, when there was music going on. So he said, well, I said, well, Stephen's manager said I could stay here. He said, and it was a 2-bedroom flat, 2 bathrooms. So he said he was recording an album and he wouldn't be there much, so it wouldn't be a problem. So as it turned out, the first night that I was there, I went into my room and there wasn't a blanket on the bed. There was a bedspread, but they did that over there. And so I went over to Jackson's door and I said, knock, knock. I said, I don't have a blanket on my bed. So anyway, he ended up writing a song for me called Something Fine. And he recorded it on his first album. And it's still played. And sometimes when I go, if he's in town and I'm in town, he'll sing it for me at the concert. He sang
Fantastic.
it at the concert cabal in Amsterdam, which was quite a thrill.
Papers lie there helplessly in a pile outside the door. I tried and tried, but I just can't remember what they're for. The world outside is tugging like a beggar at my sleeve. Oh, that's much too old a story to believe. Know that it's taken its share of me, even though you take such good care of me. Now you say Morocco, and that makes me smile. I haven't seen Morocco for a long, long while. Dreams are rolling down across the places in my mind, and I've just had a taste of something fine.
Amazing, yeah. I've seen a recent version of him doing that song live recently. Fantastic. So that's quite a cool story to have.
That's a new one for me. I'll have to check into that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I started writing my story, and as it happened, the person who was helping me co-writing, who was a writer, he had so many other things going on, it really didn't work out. So I still have all the notes, but I do want to finish the book because I'm still going.
Fantastic.
Well, it's really important. I think one of the most beautiful aspects of life is telling your story and sharing your story and the wisdom that you gather along the way and the experiences and, your survival techniques and, just the way you evolve as a person and as a human being on this planet of ours is,
Had to keep going.
you are a rainbow,
Oh, thank you,
full
Don.
spectrum. Yes, full spectrum.
Well,
And
I certainly am a survivor. I have gone through many sections.
Yeah. And just to be able to what we try to do on this podcast is Donna tells stories, and it's about what you've learned along the way, so that other people are going through perhaps different things on the surface, but a lot of the emotions can be similar, whether it's life changes, whether it's grief and loss, whatever else. So I really do hope that book comes to fruition. And so today you're working on a book, you paint. What's life like today?
Well, right now I lived in this 90-year-old beach cottage for 21 years, and the owner, who's my age, wanted it back, and all my paintings are in storage, and all my furniture and belongings. I have in my hotel room, I have all my slides and film, and I'm supposed to be editing, and I have been editing. But I got so depressed, just the stages of loss, the life. I had a patio, and there was a happy hour for doggies. They called it Yappy Hour. And I'd be out in my front patio painting. And for 1 hour, like from 5:30 to 6:30 in the summers, one of the neighbors would give the doggy treats out. So just, and the owners would walk them from the neighborhood, which was a block and a half from the ocean. So I made a lot of doggy friends, and I spent a lot of time and met so many interesting people being out there and painting, and just people stopping to chat. They're walking, and the air's fresh, and you just want to have a little fresh air chat. So that was very unique. But I have had to struggle with the loss of that life, and I'm just getting through probably the first part of that.
May I just inject that this is a time on planet Earth that I've experienced a great deal of humility, and Dr. Adam and I have talked about the antithesis of greed and arrogance that has been so pervasive on this planet for way too long.
I know.
That the antidote for greed and arrogance is humility. So consider yourself part of the healing, even though it seems difficult, and it is difficult, but being humbled is part of the healing that this planet is requiring.
Isn't that the truth? Yes, it's a wise vision that you have there, and it's so true.
And please project that out to the ocean when you have the honor of being in an environment like La Jolla and having grown up there and so many experiences there, including this one, because we don't know what our divine calling is, and where we're supposed to be, exactly we are. And so, I just say I feel so grateful every day, to wake up and have another day to experience life.
That's a wonderful share, because it's so true. And, you have to move on. I feel like I have to move on. Sometimes.
And we sincerely appreciate your precious time and all of your experiences and all of the people that you've met and the people that have been woven in and out of your life. That
isn't that the truth? Oh my
make
God.
It so colorful. So.
And I know we're wrapping up. I've got to ask you really quickly though, Salli.
Okay.
A couple of things. The first one is psychology. Do you have a degree in psychology, or you've studied
Yes,
psychology?
I do. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Me too.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to be a a therapist because I thought that would support my art habit, but that's not the way it worked. I was too sensitive to do both.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
difficulty
the art
of
won
that.
out.
The art won out, which we're glad to, and we ask our listeners to please check out your website, and you also sell some of your artwork on there as well. So anyone that's interested to check that out. And Donna, do you want to ask the secret weapon question or?
That's exactly, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's how we end our well, we haven't for a little while. But I think this is an occasion that we're wrapping up our season. You are our season finale, Salli.
Oh, I'm honored.
And season finale Salli now. not just the Queen of La Jolla. You know?
Oh, cute. Donna, I want to meet up with you when you come to LA, and
I'm going to be coming to La Jolla probably very soon, so I will
good.
let you know. And tell us your secret weapon.
Oh, my secret weapon is hide it with a smile.
Oh, lovely. Well, I would say let your feelings rise. And if there's any shadow in those feelings, let them come out so that you can shine. And I do look forward to seeing you in person after so long.
Yes, me too, Donna. It's been a pleasure.
God bless you. And thanks for hanging 10 on Love's a Secret Weapon.
Yes,